Welcome. Good afternoon to you both, and welcome to everyone who's watching today. I want to introduce to you some very, very important people within the city of Toronto in terms of art and culinary. Chef Roger Mooking and our curator, Julie Crooks. A big hello.
What's up? What's up, Renee?
Welcome. I'm just introducing the series today for everyone who is watching. This is a new series that we're starting at the AGO called Foodways, Culinary Conversations. And the conversation today with Chef Roger and Julie is going to be focused on our exhibition, Fragments of Epic Memory. It is on view right now at the gallery. I really do hope you can come and join it and see it and really just immerse yourself in the experience. We're going to talk about food, we're going to talk about art, and sort of the intersection of all of the good things of culture that really just get us invigorated and excited about food and the future and culture and all of the things. It's great. And some of the things that are just a little bit maybe hard to talk about too, but we're going to touch on a lot of things today. So please stay with us and join us. Again, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd love to start off right at the top and just talk about sort of how you came to food, Roger. What really brought you into the food realm and inspired you to become a chef?
Well, I'm now the third generation food and beverage person in my family. My grandfather came from China, ended up in Trinidad in the Caribbean. After a while, he opened a bakery and restaurants, and he opened in the Netherlands, Antilles, in an island called the Bonaire, a Chinese restaurant. My dad took over that restaurant and ran it for 20 years. So, like I was saying, I'm now the third generation food and beverage person in my family. My affinity for food was just because I love to eat food. And so, I realized that the fastest way that I can put what I wanted in my mouth was to learn how to cook it myself. So I just started cooking, and I had good teachers around me, of course, but I just started cooking and learning from a young age, standing on a stool, 4 years old, learning how to cut up the chicken to make curry chicken, and making pastels and on sweet bread and all this kind of stuff, right? So I just kind of came by it earnestly with my family, and just such a big part of my life. And then when I was about 15, I took a construction job in the summer, and I was so bad at it that the guy basically drove me into the back of a restaurant that he had just finished renovating. And I started flipping pancakes like right there. And I was like, oh man, this is cool. I caught the bug, and before you knew it, I was there making food and then taking that money and making records.
Amazing. I love the story of where your family came from and how you've molded and your family's molded into what it is today, and how you've taken culture through the generations. And being brought up in Edmonton, how did that then shape your journey in Canada, like from China and Trinidad, Netherlands and Canada? What evolved?
When my family moved to Canada when I was 5 years old, and we went straight to Edmonton, Alberta, right? So, Edmonton, Alberta at that time, I think there was 6 Black people in Alberta at the time, and my family had 5 of them. So, it had its challenges and it was interesting, but, my parents really wanted to, be embraced and embrace the Canadian culture. So in Edmonton at that time, it was a very homogenous society. There was a lot of Eastern European and Ukrainians specifically. So I remember coming home, my mother always wanted to learn, and, food was always the gateway to culture in our household, food and music. So my mother, I would come home from school one day, and there'd be some 85-year-old Ukrainian baba in our kitchen teaching my mother how to make cabbage rolls and pierogies and all this stuff, right? Borscht. And so it wasn't unusual that would be just a regular occurrence. And then we found out where the local roti shop was. And then before you know it, the woman who's making the roti skins is at our house too, teaching my mother how to make the roti skins her way. And so we just kind of really embraced whatever was around us and dove in and tried to learn from that, because being a person of color at that time, especially in Alberta in the prairies, it had some extenuating challenges, as I'm sure you can imagine. So we did our best to try and understand the people around us so that they could understand us in return, and that's the give and take. And food was a major gateway for that.
It's just a conduit, isn't it? It really just it's it's a language that doesn't need to be spoken.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Doesn't need to be spoken. It's one of those ties that binds, and everybody needs food in their life. So some people use it, like some gym rats. That's just it's pure fuel. All they like they're counting the calories for the fuel to get their gains, and some people like interact with food like that. Other people are really passionate about it, like myself, and curious and want to explore the world through food. But regardless, everybody has to interact with it in some way. So it is that universal language.
Not just fuel. It definitely it feeds the soul. Kind of ties into the next question I wanted to ask about just the emotion of food. We're all so closely connected. I think again, just that foundation of food in every culture is so important. Uh, Whether it be my history, Portière and pied de cochon and French Canadian, all those really humble dishes. Like that's my soul, and I would love to cook it every day. But just can't. But what is the emotion of food for you? What is that feeling? Is there an emotion and that taste of place? Like what are some emotions and feelings and flavors that really just stir up the
Well,
history of food for
yeah,
you?
it's an interesting question because that the emotion is really connected to the memory, right?
Mhm.
And the memory is really connected to the culture, right? So, I was born in Trinidad and my family came to Edmonton when I was 5, but I have a lot of very, very vivid memories from being 3 years old. And some of my most memorable memories from very young are around a table, standing in the kitchen, learning how to make dumplings. And so being in the Caribbean at that time, um you really get a sense that the food emulates the culture. Like, at the Fragments of Memory exhibit, you'll see the moko jumbi, right? So the moko jumbi, the jumbi is basically like the spirits. So the moko jumbi is warding off the evil spirits, essentially, right? So, and if you look at the moko jumbi, it's bright, it's bold, it's dynamic, it's colorful, it's drawing from the ancestors, but it's also wearing Nike. So it's in the moment of today. So it
Mhm.
really is that pivotal moment and experience of drawing from the culture and the ancestors and bringing it into today's contemporary format. And so all those things tie together culturally, and those things seep into your memory. And from a neurological standpoint, a couple of years ago I had a concussion, so I spent a lot of time learning
Right.
from neurosurgeons and
Mhm.
reading a lot about how the brain works, and
Mhm.
just learning about how the brain works. And our nervous system is so directly, of course, connected to our entire body, but of course to our minds. And we psychologically trigger, and I don't mean trigger in a traumatic way. There are psychological triggers that are connected to our senses. So some of those senses are from our eyes, smell, sounds, but a lot of those are coming from our mouth, because the mouth, it has the sense of taste, but it's also using the eyes, it's also using the nose. There's also sensory perception from the ears, the way something sounds as it's sizzling on a hot plate. So food is one of those really encompassing things that attaches all of our senses, and the brain takes it and goes, whoa, this is a massive sensory input happening right here, and it's a wonderful memory. I'm going to cap this and hold on to it. And it holds on to, like if you come in your house and let's say your partner is baking a cookies that your grandmother used to bake, instantly it takes you back to that moment of your grandmother baking those cookies. In my
And
house, those are coconut cookies with with molasses. You know what
and
I
your
mean?
heart just is like,
And you just know, oh
mhm.
my god, boom, it's instantly transports you, and it takes you back to the roots of your culture, the essence, but also embracing all of those things in a very hypersensitive way that is physiological. It seeps into your pores, literally. And I think this is what the magic of food and memory and culture does. And with Julie doing such a great job of curating the exhibit there, I think she's done, exactly the same, curating all these images and these stories and these people and the culture. And you understand how dynamic the Caribbean is, because a lot of people think of the Caribbean in North America and they're like, oh, jerk chicken. I know jerk chicken. I know roti. and I know Carabana, right, right. But the diaspora of the Caribbean is as regional. People respect this with Italian cuisine. I like Sicilian food. No, I like the Romagna region. The cuisine is very, very regional. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the cuisine of the Caribbean is as nuanced and as regional and territorial. Like, don't go to Barbados asking for curry goat.
You
No,
could try.
you could try,
but
You'll be
it's
turned
going to
away.
be an epic failure.
Get back
it's
on the
an
plane.
yeah, it's an epic and in return, you don't go to Jamaica asking for flying fish. Right? Like, they don't even make it island to island. It's not even part of the menu. It's not, and they're using and accessing many of the same ingredients, right? So it's that regionality of the cuisine that I think, from what my mediums are with food and music, really ties in beautifully with what Julie's created at the museum there with the fragments exhibit. It's really, really special. And I look at a lot of those pictures and those images, and I think, wow, I've seen family photos that look just like that. And it's the range of the diaspora, not only the African diaspora, but the global diaspora, because as you know, the tropics were and are very rich in natural resources. Trinidad has one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Sugar plantations. We could go on and on about the natural resources there, and people wanted those natural resources. So, you had the British coming to try and cop it. You had the Spanish coming to try and cop it. You had the Portuguese trying and cop it. The Dutch trying to cop it. And they've succeeded in many ways in doing that, but it's just really interesting how the cultural exhibit that Julie's curated really ties back and comes together with the food, but also ties into all those other elements that really make up the diaspora and make it really interesting and unique. So, Julie, I thank you for that. It's really inspiring.
My pleasure.
It is epic.
It's epic.
It is epic.
And for somebody like me who goes into a museum and does not normally see myself in a museum, it is a very moving, emotional thing to see yourselves in such a place of regard, right? In a place that you're not normally even necessarily welcome in. Yes, you are welcome. You can pay your money and go. Everybody can pay their money and go, but you're not welcome. You're not part of the experience. You don't see yourself there. You don't imagine that you belong there. So it's very, very important to see something like this inside of the museum, where I could feel that this place is also for me, right? To me, it's like seeing Barack Obama as a president.
Well, I mean, all praises to Auntie Claire, because honestly, I'm being very serious. She kind of, it is the elders that kind of set the pathway to many of us to actually be in positions that we have now. So we're kind of standing on the shoulders of Auntie Claire and Uncle Roger and other people who really do set the stage and allowed a kind of the next generation to kind of take up the mantle and continue that fight. I think you're right, Renee. This wouldn't be happening. There's no such thing as a Moko Jumbi taking up Walker Court, or a show called Fragments of Epic Memory, or, an intervention in the From Gallery. None of that is happening 10, 12 years ago. Right. But I think I would say George Floyd was a pivotal moment, but also that even before that, we were having these conversations. By the time I started, definitely in 2017, a lot of awkward, difficult, conversations were being had, but we had to have those conversations in order to push forward and to kind of decenter a lot of things, in order to center other things, other narratives, other stories, other art, food, even, you know what I mean? Like Yeah, I think the possibilities are endless now, and I think that's what is exciting about a show like Fragments, that like actually in the material, in the objects, food. In the
Mm,
objects, we are looking at food production. We are looking
yeah,
at the introduction of foods not native to the Caribbean. We are in, like,
yeah.
it's so um dense, and I think the audiences, from what I can see, are fascinated, excited, thrilled, and curious to kind of delve even more deeply into what are these foodways, what are these food histories, what are they, how do they manifest themselves in the diaspora, how do they change, how are they refined. And I think, that's what both of you do actually in your respective kitchens.
Mm.
And I think that's what a lot of us do in our own kitchens, how we turn, you know, how we've turned oxtail into a delicacy, how,
I hope they didn't, man, because the prices went up like
well,
tenfold when that happened. Oxtail used to be cheap like chicken wings.
very, now you get 3 for like $30. I'm just saying,
Yeah, it's no
it's
joke.
ridiculous. Anyway, I'll just, in answer to your question, definitely, it's a protracted shift and change, but we kind of keep moving along.
Nice.
Yeah.
Question for you, Roger. We're talking about that on the shoulders of and being sort of steeped in tradition. How do we keep the tradition and continue to evolve in culinary, in our own personal journeys, but in culinary specifically? Is there something that you are doing or are keen to do to look forward and to keep the tradition, but those creativity moments and those creative moments to keep them pressing forward and ever evolving?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because that would need someone to really respect the concept of time. I don't really respect the concept of time. I read a lot of physics stuff, and there quantum physics and a bunch of stuff like this. And there's actually a great debate about whether time is just a pure fabrication, like money is, right? So it's actually becoming less and less of a great debate as they dive deeper into quantum physics. But I digress. So we go back and we talk about. I say that because we're talking about the trajectory of traditions versus the evolution of a tradition, right? So things are always constantly in an evolving flux. Okay, so I honor and I respect all of the traditions. I still make black cake every Christmas. I still make sweet bread. I got to make sure the ham is cooking for Christmas morning so the house smell like ham. So when I eat my sweet bread, like there's those things, but that is my neurological physiology saying these are things that I love and put me in a warm, fuzzy place, right? But as culture evolves, the same way that, we didn't always used to cook with certain spices, for instance, right? Because those spices were not available in the Caribbean. And then along came the Portuguese, and they come and they introduce codfish, salted codfish. And then that salted codfish, it finds its way into Jamaica, and then they make ackee and saltfish. That same codfish from Portugal finds its way into Trinidad, and we make saltfish acras, which is like a saltfish fritter, right? So in that moment, now we know this. Again, this is why I bring up time, because now in the trajectory of, if you perceive linear time, where I am standing today, I'm standing on the tradition, let me say that properly, right? Of the akra and the ackee and saltfish, okay? But that didn't always exist. That was not always part of the tradition in the Caribbean until those ingredients found their way to the island through colonialism, right? So that was not a part of the history previously. It wasn't part of people's memories. It wasn't part of having to wake up Christmas morning and smell the ham. It wasn't that didn't exist. But through history, searching for resources, human ambition, etc., etc., the ingredient palette changed, and the availability of ingredients changed in that region, and then that region now created something new. So all of the traditions that we're standing on now were evolved at some point. And
how do
so
we balance that moment? I was just thinking about it. There's a lot of conversation about appropriation, but the amalgamation, I think, is what you're like, amalgamation of cultures more than appropriation, and not just taking, but bringing together of more an amalgamation. And you're borrowing flavors and not just taking them.
Well, I think what's important about that is like, and and YouTube has really killed this for a lot of people. They can just look at YouTube and figure out everything, but you don't know the history of it. You don't know the lineage of it. How did that come to be? I think a big part of respecting and pushing and evolving something forward in a meaningful way is understanding the ground of which you're standing on for that thing. So we go out in the world to evolve and make decisions that are more constructive to the betterment of everyone around us. So when it comes to a matter of appropriation, I think that it's really important that if somebody is interested in a culture and wants to dive into and explore a culture, really put yourself in that place. One thing that bugs me a lot is I'll be like checking something on Instagram or something, right? Or TikTok. And I'm watching the TikTok, Instagram, and they're like all dancing and doing their dances, and they're dancing, wearing their little outfit or whatever. And they're dancing to like some like hip hop, right? But like I know that 100% of those people who are dancing to that hip hop, probably not all of them like Barack Obama over Donald Trump. Right? Right. So there's this thing where you're appropriating the culture and the pieces and the parts that are convenient for you, right? Without truly respecting the culture that it's coming from. And that, I think, is where the conundrum lies. In 50 years, everybody's going to look like kind of a light version of me, like the world is just going to mix. It's just going to continue to do that. Right. And I think that that's inevitable. And as the Polish person marries the Trini, then they'll create new traditions. As the Trini from the north marries the Trini from the south, they will create their own little traditions. As the Chinese meets the Japanese, they will, and so this is just a natural evolution. And the mind, I go back to that, just likes ease and comfort. So where people are resistant to change, well, I'm sorry, things are just going to continue to change, whether you like it or not. Not speaking to you specifically, Renee, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Whether you like it or not, things will continue to change, and you could either choose to be left behind or trying to, fight, beat down the door and fight your way out of not having to change. But the world continues to change, but you have to stand on a foundation of respect and understanding before you can understand that. Don't just be like going out and making oxtail and you never been to a Jamaican person's house kicking it for like hanging out, chilling out. That's your people. Right? Yeah, then come around and be like, yo, I want to learn how to make this oxtail. Right? They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand, right?
Yeah. It's the educating, and it's the patience to learn, I think, for people. It's the patience to be able to learn and absorb and not just see something cool or see something fun and take it and make it your own. I think it's definitely that patience to learn and that patience to understand people and where things are from and the tradition, those own traditions, to make new ones, as you said.
And it's traumatic, like you see people, and I will be one who will complain about appropriation like that, right? But it's traumatic. It's traumatic to see people take your culture and capitalize on it, and you can't even capitalize on it anymore, right? I can't even monetize it anymore because this person's now capitalized and monetized it and cornered it, right? So, okay, there's a certain amount of value to be said for human ambition. They took some human ambition and they, went and did their thing. But now you've neglected and eliminated my ability to capitalize on the ground that I am meant to be standing on. that's where the problem is, right?
100%. 100%. What have you seen in terms of the landscape of food over the last, you've been in this industry for many, many years. So the landscape of food in tying into this traditions melding and the new nuances of moving to new places, absorbing of cultures and becoming more holistic. How have you seen the landscape change in terms of a culinary perspective over the last decades that you've been in this business?
So it's a couple things. I mean, as a working professional, when I started out in kitchens, I was generally always the only person of color on the staff. Like, could be 100 people on the staff and I'd be one, you know? And now that's changed. I came up in the mix like in the 80s. The only real restaurants you see around were really bad chain restaurants, like really, really, really bad ones, and Italian restaurants. Like that was what a restaurant was back in the 80s, was an Italian bruschetta. Right? That was the 80s. Like that's just how it was. And that's what restaurants were, right? And then you come out and you're moving into the 90s and the 2000s, and you walk down the street, you see restaurants of all kinds. Even I go to Texas, Houston, Texas is one of the most diverse places in America, and you wouldn't even imagine that that's like that inside of Texas, right? So I've noticed that in terms of the restaurant landscape has changed, the offerings, the diversity of those offerings, the authenticity and the diversity of those offerings has changed dramatically. From a professional standpoint, I see the makeups of the kitchen, the people in the kitchens are very, very different. I'm sure even Renee, you noticed that yourself throughout your trajectory in this industry. It was just a very different animal, and funny thing is, in the 80s, all those Italian restaurants, the people that were really cooking the food at that time were Sri Lankan immigrants. So, and that was a thing coming up. And so you would see like Italian restaurant, you'd see like all white people in the front, but in the back, it would be like one Italian chef. And then it's like all Sri Lankan immigrant chefs at that point in times, particularly during the 80s. But I mean, those are some of the things that I've seen. Really, I've seen diversity in the front and the back, and in terms of the offerings have changed dramatically over the years.
And just tying into that a little bit, you touched on it, I think, pretty precisely. For so long, it was Italian. That was where it. We went for a great meal. Everybody went for a great meal, and maybe it was a French restaurant. And I still think we have a lot of that in our sort of culture, maybe, or preconceived notions of what good food is. And people think, oh, I'm going to an Italian restaurant, it's going to be great. But they don't put the same weight or merit onto other restaurants, whether Jamaican or Trinidadian or Chinese. There's a disparity there in terms of what the weight is. Oh, I was classically French trained, so I'm better than the Chinese trained chef. And there's no merit to that at all. And there's this preconceived notion, I think, in general with public, right, that in a larger spectrum of public, that there is something finer about one than the other. And I don't know how we educate more and teach people more about the nuances of each cuisine and the merit and the weight that all food and all cultures have. And that's, I think, part of the art conversation and just the holistic conversation of bringing people together and parity and I wonder what we can do as a people, as a group of people in this city, in this country, to help educate and bring that equal merit and equal weight to all cuisines.
I think in this instance, what you're talking about, the food is really just a gateway. The food is really just a representation of what's happening in the society, right? So you see that disparity. Like, for instance, you go to Italian, right? And I love Italian food. Don't get it twisted, like all this stuff. I don't want to hear about all the comments and all this stuff, right? Okay, I love Italian food. It's all good. But you go to Italian restaurant, you pay, $35 for a plate of pasta. What is pasta? Some eggs, some water, some flour, some salt. and then some tomatoes, it's really cheap actually. Right?
All right.
So the cost of goods may be $2, but they can charge $35. The cost of goods for, I don't know if you've purchased a whole snapper lately, but it's not $2. And to turn that into escovitch, you need to marinate it properly, do blah, 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 do the whole thing, blah, 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 blah. And the margin on that is very, very slim. Now, okay, you say, how do we tackle that, right? So again, the food is just a gateway. It's just a conduit to understanding. It's just a point of reference. It's like how COVID came and showed inequities in the society that already existed. So these inequities not only just existed, because existing just kind of means that like, oh, it was there. No, it was actually fabricated and created and built for that sensibility, right? To have this European dominance, like you say, right? So you have that sensibility pervasive in the food, but to tackle that, you need to tackle socioeconomic inequalities. You need to tackle, like in America, voting registration. All of these things, I could go on, like police brutality. Like I could just sit here, I could ream off nouns and adjectives for probably a week straight to you. And I'm sure you're likely exhausted because you hear about it all the time in the media, right? But you have to tackle all of these things because you can't undo hundreds of years of genocide in one plate of pasta, right? Or one escovitch or one curry goat at a time, right? It's cumulative, and it is concurrent, and it adds on in layers. But those layers also have to play with all those other day-to-day things, yeah, I mean, it's such a big, like, education school, like, there's just so many layers to it that's not built, and so, I mean, the food is a microcosm of that. It's a great indicator of that. It's a great little snapshot to showcase that thing, but it really is pervasive, and we need to tackle every aspect of it piece by piece,
Of course.
and cumulatively, and it's going to take
Yeah.
hundreds of years.
It's a fraction of the conversation, but I think you did say it is such a gateway that we all need it to survive. So it is a gateway that can hopefully push the conversation and hopefully drive more momentum to the better future that we all hope for. I think there's a moment, and we may not see it in our lifetime. But we do hope that movement and that direction.
But hey, you know what I saw? You know what I saw in my lifetime? I saw Barack Obama as a president. I saw fragments of epic memory inside the museum. I saw that. I saw things that I know and that I love, that are familiar to me in places that I never ever imagined that I would ever see it. Like, so we have like a black person on a piece of currency in Canada. Like, whoa, I just never thought I would see that, right? So here we are. We've made strides, but like I said, there's just hundreds of years of this position and this very pointed framework that's constructed for dominance, right? So piece by piece. Today I saw for the very first time, like those overhead Instagram videos where you just see the cook's hands coming in and then they like go. The first time today I saw black hands doing that. I was like, whoa, there's black hands. There's black hands doing that now. And I mean, it wasn't my hands. Like, I've seen my hands doing it, of course, but it's like, whoa, they hired a black hand to do this thing, right? My next thing is how many black people were behind the camera. Like I just did a shoot the other day. In front of the camera was 2 black people. Behind the camera, 0 black people. Right. So to me, I look at that and it's like, oh, this is like just performance. And I feel guilt as being part of the performance. But also, if I'm not there, then I'm not there. Right. So this is the conundrum that I constantly find myself in, is being part of the performance, but making sure that I'm doing it authentic to me and authentic to the ground that I'm standing on, that was built for me and before me, right? And carrying on that lineage and that trajectory.
Building new traditions, building better
Building.
ways, building up,
Building up
instead of tearing down. I think that's great. I think we've concluded. I do want to say thank you. I would love to keep talking and at length, but I'm sure we will talk again. Julie, I think you've done wonderful things here at the gallery and really are bringing forward and present conversations and exhibitions, again, representation and seeing oneself on a piece of art is so important. Roger, I thank you for being part of this conversation as well. It's truly touching to see the road in which we're traveling together to make good foundations for future generations and for all. I just really want to thank you for being part of this. It's been a very special time.
Thank you very much. Thank
yes.
you.
And for all of you watching, appreciate you tuning in to our segment on Foodways, Culinary Conversations, Caribbean Flavors. Thanks so much. Take care.